And we are recording with Mr. Joe Kent, running for Congress out of Washington State, and of course, Dr. Robert Malone, the king of misinformation, the king of disinformation. Don't listen to a word he says. He is an anti-vaxxer, and aside from his patents on the mRNA vaccine, he doesn't know a thing about it. And but the purpose of this, Joe, could you maybe, excuse me, Mr. Kent, could you maybe take this away towards the WEF and what exactly you want to get to?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, and great to see you again, Dr. Malone. Yeah, I mean, the World Economic Forum, I think we just wrapped up the WHO and the WEF's annual meetings in Davos and Geneva, and we avoided ceding our sovereignty to the World Health Organization, thankfully, because a lot of people called attention to the fact that the Biden administration was planning on signing off on this horrible policy that would give the World Health Organization essentially the ability, to my understanding, to say, hey, we believe you're not handling a pandemic correctly, and we're going to go ahead and step in here. So luckily we didn't go down that rabbit hole, but this is all part of a much larger, I mean, when you say it out loud, it sounds like some plot to a James Bond movie. But if you just look at how deeply intertwined the World Economic Forum has become with woke capital, with our major corporations, sort of the fusion of corporate America with our federal government and governments throughout the world, I think that's something that we really need to start calling out. The pandemic was a huge part of that because it gave them the emergency powers they needed to start taking away people's basic rights and for this massive consolidation of power. And I know Dr. Malone he's been all over this for a while. He was compiling all the young global leaders, so-called global leaders that the World Economic Forum has kind of tapped and started to groom. The incumbent that I'm going after, Jamie Herrera Butler, is one of them. So yeah, I think this is something that leaders at every level, especially those who are concerned about our sovereignty, have to start educating people on and safeguarding against.
Dr. Malone.
Well said. And the 2022 list is out. So we're now integrating in the 2022 graduate list into our master spreadsheet. So watch for that. And we also have the spreadsheet that basically is doxing the Young Scientists program. So that's another one to look at. And I'm really pleased to hear you highlighting things like this. I was just having a conversation with Brock Pierce about the whole WEF issue and what's going on there. He's coming out as kind of an apologist for them. I'm not really comfortable with that. You mentioned about the sovereignty issues with this. There's two pieces of, I guess we could call them legislation, pending before the World Health Organization. One is actually a treaty, and the other one is the modification of these international health records. The IHR is what I think I got it wrong. It's international health, something or other. The IHR modifications, regulations, I think, that you're referring to have not actually been withdrawn. They've been postponed. And that's going to come up again right around your election time, I think, and curiously. And my understanding is that what stopped them was not any action from Western nations, but rather a consortium of African nations that blocked them, which is paradoxical. But I guess they value their sovereignty too. The concern is that unfortunately, Africa has a history of a little tiny bit of corruption here and there. And it may be that they're just buying a little bit of time to exert leverage on African leaders. And it doesn't even require corruption. One of the things that was really revealing to me about the World Economic Forum's activities was the history of South Africa. And that essentially Nelson Mandela, when he got out of jail and took over leadership there, in his first meeting with the World Economic Forum, he went in saying he was going to nationalize a lot of the major industries in South Africa. And he went to the WEF, and it's documented. He got told, you can do that, and South Africa will get no capital from us. It will starve and it will wither on the vine. Or you can play by our rules and we'll capitalize you, but you're not going to be nationalizing anything. and you're basically going to become beholden to the world banks. So it's a really clear early example of how they're playing the hardball. And my fear is that really in conceding to this massive national debt that we've accumulated under the logic that, it doesn't matter anymore. What we've essentially done is put ourselves in the position where we either have to default on that debt or we are beholden to this same consortium of international banks and big currency that seems to be controlling everything. And so I think that the whole issue of the debt plays right into this same story.
Joe?
I think that's a great point, because I think that the debt will be weaponized against us. We're already seeing the dollar lose its value with everything that's going on. We attempted to throw the kitchen sink at Russia. Russia and the CCP have consolidated their economy, moving towards, and this is scary, because I think this is kind of where it blends with what we saw with COVID, moving towards some form of a digital currency. If they can undermine the US dollar or bring in the US dollar to a global digital currency, but then we're going to see the consolidation of power under the digital currency, but that's also going to be tied to essentially your vaccine passport, which is also going to be tied to social media. That essentially becomes what they have in China as your social credit score. And so it's going to include everything. Are you vaccinated and boosted enough? Are you behaving properly on all the monitored social media? Again, when you say this stuff out loud, I think we tend to sort of sound like Bond villains, but if you connect the dots at the way a lot of this is going, and a lot of the characters behind the World Economic Forum, how deeply involved Bill Gates is, the global bankers, the folks that are pushing everything of COVID vaccines, the Green New Deal, and the green agenda is very much a part of this. I feel like the climate change crisis, it's like their steady go-to of crisis, whereas COVID has been like this acceleration of crises that has given them some additional authorities, but they can always kind of fall back on the climate crisis. So yeah, I think we're in pretty scary waters right now, and our debt
you and I
makes us so much more
we're very
vulnerable.
aligned. I come back to that same concern that the underpinning science and the same exact pattern of censorship, defamation, etc., weaponization of information has been a thread all the way through the logic of global climate change and the enforcement of the common narrative in that case. And I'm increasingly concerned that we're seeing the same kind of science play out, where we have this dominance of a group of individuals that are not allowed to be challenged. And even if this is not a problem of having selected a relatively narrow window of time and drawing big conclusions about trends from that narrow window of time, even if it's not that, let's say that there is some robust trend, that trend could be multifactorial, and the assumption is being made that it's a consequence of various practices having to do with CO2 release. But that's a hypothesis. That correlation I haven't seen really well established, but it's not my core competency. But I think we're all in the same boat. After the way we've seen the manipulation of information over the last 2 years, it causes all of us to start questioning this. But back to I hadn't been aware that your opponent was a young leader trainee. I think that is a crucial issue, because as we just put out in a Substack a couple days ago, we're of the opinion that these people basically are beholden to it's really a trade organization of the largest corporations in the world. And they've been trained over a 5-year program by this trade organization to represent their point of view and their interests. And if that's really the case, they, at a minimum, I would think your opponent needs to make a clear and unambiguous statement that he is supporting the US Constitution and not supporting the agenda of the WEF and the globalists. If he's not, I don't see how he can swear an oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. He's not. He really. This is a strong statement. I feel like these people should register as foreign agents.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the way that they get them, and this is kind of like the DC playbook 101. If you look at my opponent, she's been funded for quite a while by major global corporations. She takes money from Big Pharma, Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft, the defense industry. Koch Industries is another one. And Koch Industries has been buying up massive amounts of our manufacturing base. They buy them and they slowly gut them and they send them overseas, mainly to China. We've had a lot of that in the district here with our paper mills because we're in timber country. And these are the folks that fund her. And then you get a representative, I guess, from the WF that comes over and says, hey, we'd like to have an interview and a chat with you. And the next thing you know, she has access to all these different special interest groups. So I think there's a really good chance that she would say, oh, of course, yeah, I support and defend the Constitution of the United States. But then if you look at where she gets all of her money, because she doesn't get very much at all from we the people, she doesn't make that much on individual contributions, but the vast majority of her coffers are coming from these globalist corporations that benefit from the Great Reset and the agenda of the World Economic Forum, which primarily means the U.S. remains a hollowed out economy that relies on printing up a bunch of nonsense money and keeping our supply chains overseas. And then again, she takes money from major pharmaceutical companies and she voted for the vaccine tracking database. So the whole, when you paint the whole picture of how she's funded and where her agenda is going, and then not to mention she's against the Second Amendment, just has a completely and totally atrocious record by Republican standards. But really, when you look at the direction it leans, it doesn't lean left, it doesn't lean right. It leans incredibly globalist, World Economic Forum, Great Reset agenda.
You just nailed it right on the head. And I had a political scientist, serious political scientist, criticize me the other day. He said that what's happened has not been that the left has shifted far left. What's happened is the Democratic Party has shifted right as it's become aligned with the globalist interests. They've essentially been captured, and that really there is a remarkable growing alignment between the traditional left and the traditional right, in that we all share a commitment to freedom, liberty, individualism, as opposed to collectivism and utilitarianism. Remember, that's really where these guys are coming from. They think that we can all be engineered for the greatest good, for the greatest number, and they're the ones to do the engineering. They think that we as human beings can be reduced to items on a spreadsheet that can be optimized. And I'm sure your constituents, and certainly most of the people I'm familiar with, and the people that I'm here to speak to in Austin tomorrow, are completely aligned around the idea that what made America great was the logic of individual freedom, the freedom to choose, the freedom to exist in a decentralized environment in which we don't, the whole thrust of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and everything else is all written around the logic that a decentralized power base, where you push the authority to make decisions down to the lowest possible level, is the best way to go. And what I'm hearing all over the world, as you know, I've been traveling quite a bit, is people really waking up to the problem of centralized control and power. That's what we've had. And what these guys want is they want more centralized control, as you point out correctly, and they want the people to be in control, to be the big corporations. That's the logic here. And once again, I'll say those rather shocking words. The other word for corporatism is fascism. That's what it is. The alignment and fusion between the interests of the state and large corporations is called fascism. If you properly analyze the language in accepted political science, that is the definition. And that's what these people want. And they hide it behind some other words. They're really active in trying to manipulate our language, because that's the good way to manipulate our thinking. And the word they use is public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
And it sounds very benign, public-private partnerships. How could you not like public-private partnerships? What it means is the corporations are in there with the government making all the key decisions for how you and I are going to live.
Yeah, well, it is all about semantics. A final solution doesn't sound bad. Get rid of a problem until you look at what it really is. But yeah, we're through the looking glass, man. It's the literal, bash the fash, punch a Nazi. That group is for the marriage of big tech and big pharma with the government while funding literal Nazis. I mean, I used to think the hypocrisy would eventually reach this boiling point where they'd have to look in the mirror. I have now lost any hope of that. I've realized, oh Lord, we've gone over the cliff and still nobody cares.
No.
Yeah.
That's when I first heard Matthias Desmond and his thoughts about mass formation, it was as if a bell had been rung, and I everything made sense, and it was so fascinating the way that all of the established media in unison spoke out in umbrage that, oh, this is not true. This is not a real academic. Oh, he's only a full professor. This is exactly what he studied his whole life. And the more I've talked to him and worked with him, the more I'm convinced that his thinking is correct in these things, that we do have a form of hypnosis that's taken over a large fraction of the population. The question is, how large is the fraction? And the other question here in the current context is, how much penetration there has been in that hypnosis into your particular district. You said you have a lumber and paper mill interests. Are you eastern or western slope of the Cascades?
So we're on the west. We're the one red district that touches the Pacific Ocean in the whole continent of the United States. So heart of timber country. Yeah, very. Even though we live like literally in the shadow of Portland, Oregon, we're actually very conservative. So a lot of what's happened with globalization, of killing off the timber industry at the altar of environmentalism, but then also shipping all of our manufacturing, our sawmills overseas. That's been huge. Technology is big out here as well. We're right in Bill Gates's backyard. So all of these things are pretty relevant. And like you said, yeah, it's a question of can we break free from the amount of control that this global reset and then I think the establishment really has over people. I feel like a lot of times the progressive left and the globalists, they're not even trying to win arguments anymore because they know they can't. They just care about seizing power. Like if Dr. Malone gets on Joe Rogan's podcast, you immediately have to strip him off social media and make that forbidden because he just reached too many people. Like they don't even try and counter you, and it's the same thing you see, I mean, throughout social media. If too much truth cracks through, they cancel people. And so it's like it's this weird spot where the folks on the other side of the aisle from us, they're not really even trying to counter us and beat us in the marketplace of ideas. It's literally who can seize the most power right now. But I think that itself has exposed them in ways that we couldn't have done individually. So I do believe there's a lot of folks right now, especially because out here in Washington State, we had such draconian COVID policies because of our governor that a lot of folks are just like, hey, I'm done with this. Like I will not. If you're taking away any of my rights or telling me why I have to cede more control to you, to the government, to a centralized authority, like I'm out, not listening. So we're getting a lot of folks coming over to our side. That's what actually keeps me going every day with all the bad news we get. There's so many people every day that are coming over to our side.
Of course, you mentioned Governor Inslee. He's also a WEF trainee.
Yes. Yeah.
So, oh, you didn't know that, Tommy?
I didn't. No.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of posturing going on right now about who's going to be running for president and how they're going to handle the problem of Biden's, let's say, cognitive decline. And I'm hearing some very fascinating gaming, but it all comes down to whether or not the Republicans can really drive this wave election. The only way that we're going to get there to any kind of a semblance of the old United States is going to be with a wave election at the midterm, because that's going to control whether or not we have integrity in our electoral process for the presidential election. This is so crucial. And if anybody is questioning that, they should see the letter that's been put out just, I think, today. I think Ted Cruz probably drove that, where we've got, 18 different members of Congress directly questioning the FDA over the craziness that they've been propagating with the vaccines, and particularly now with the vaccines for children. That's, the only way that kind of logic, that the corruption that we're seeing can be countered is if we have a strong Congress that's willing to challenge the Biden administration currently. And if we don't do that, a lot of people are really concerned about what the subsequent election is going to be like. I suspect you guys will follow California and have all mail-in ballots.
We've unfortunately been doing mail-in ballots for quite a while out here, and we're actually, we don't have a mechanism for any kind of full forensic audit. I'm involved in a series of lawsuits right now in the state where we're trying to sue to actually just see our ballots. And in the Democrats, Jay Inslee, they have interceded with Perkins Coie to represent them. So that lets us know that we're over target, because it's just a group of civilians saying, hey, we'd like to be able to see our ballots. Next thing you know, here comes Perkins Coie billing their client at about $1,200 an hour. So that's unfortunate, the state of play out here, but I couldn't agree with you more. I think when we have a wave election, I think it's going to be incumbent upon us to really use our oversight abilities to show the American people what actually happened in 2020. I mean, I have my own theories, but I think that we just need to finally lay it all out to really preserve the integrity of our elections and to give the American people trust in our system again. Like right now, especially in the post-COVID era, I just think Americans don't trust our institutions, and there's so many that think that the elections are they just can't be trusted, and that right there is going to take us in a very dark direction as a country. So I think we absolutely have to preserve that, and then do everything that we can to just show the danger of sending out unsolicited mail-out ballots and then these closed code tabulation machines. Let's just get back to voting in person, and it gets counted in front of representatives from each party, and everybody can have some degree of trust in who we're putting into office. But it's funny because we're thought criminals right now for even having this conversation. Like we're propagating the big lie by even saying, hey, I think maybe we should check some stuff out.
We're domestic terrorists,
Of course.
by the definition of Mr. Mayorkas, I think is his pronunciation. And that gets back to another thing that may or may not be on your radar there in Washington State, is how we can counter the ability of these major financial interests to control all channels of information. I mean, here we've got Tommy sitting in his condo with a flag at his back, and he represents the cutting edge of breaking through the media firewall that's been developed and implemented in such an amazing, harmonized global fashion. And Tommy is at risk at any moment to have all of his information suddenly disappeared and deplatformed, delisted. The URLs, even the pointers to his information, can be deleted. Do you have any thoughts? I have thoughts, and I'm actively involved in some initiatives based on blockchain technology, which is why I'm here for this Bitcoin digital conference in Austin. But I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts about how we can counter the censorship and propaganda that's being pushed in this harmonized way, so that Tommy doesn't have to be a lone voice in the wilderness, barking against the wolves.
Well, before Joe chimes in on that, no, I predicted that before I ever even got banned from YouTube. This podcast is saved on more hard drives in more gun safes across more states than I think I even know now. It's completely decent. I couldn't shut it down if I wanted to. So
good.
In that case, I'm not too worried about. They'll nuke the website. I don't care about that. I'll just keep popping up. But
well, Tommy, while you're there, let's just put a pin on that one.
Sure.
And we've got a new initiative that is totally blockchain protected that we are deploying, and we actually have live now. So get back in touch with me about whether or not we can have you as one of our verticals.
I'll be a guinea pig
on that platform. Oh, it's more than a guinea pig. This is the technology that supports a number of major areas that you would recognize? I don't want to talk about it too much right now, but
Gotcha.
but I'd love to hear any other thoughts about how we can counter the propaganda, censorship, and information control. You're there at Tech Central. I mean, it's there in Washington State and south of San Francisco. What are you hearing, or what are your thoughts about all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think things are at a point where the only thing that we can do to preserve sovereignty in our First Amendment is really just to break up big tech aggressively, declare it a common carrier, treat it as a public utility, which I know is not the greatest solution in the world, but we at least elect our elected officials. But we don't elect Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey or any of these guys to anything, but they have an immense amount of control over, not just our First Amendment rights, but really these guys can get you canceled and deplatformed from society. I mean, just look at what they did to President Trump. They took him off all social media as a sitting U.S. president. They pretty much destroyed his ability to do business in New York City. He had to leave his home state and flee to another state. And this is all because we've allowed these companies to become these massive monopolies that are just ran by these oligarchs, most of whom really are just very blatant that they despise the way America works. And they're very much aligned with what we were just talking about, the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset. They're pumping tons of money into, things like the Center for Civic and Tech Life to help fortify the last election. Bill Gates is all over this stuff as well too. So I think breaking up big tech is absolutely essential, because I think all of the really nasty things that our government wants to do to us that we saw kind of rear its head during COVID and with the Great Reset, governments are going to be a little bit slower to do that because we still have, a constitution here in the United States. However, big tech, they can make a lot of this stuff happen really, really fast. And again, this is where that merger between big tech and government comes in, that public-private partnership comes in, and we've already seen the Biden administration say the quiet part out loud. I mean, Jen Psaki said, oh, we're working with our partners in Facebook to combat disinformation about COVID and about the last election. It's like, well, what does that mean? You guys are just going through people's Facebook posts, so now you have their metadata and you're tracking them. Bill Gates introduced that digital vaccine tracking passport in Europe that he would like to implement here. We have members of Congress, the woman I'm running against, voting for the vaccine tracking database. So the more, to me, that we can decentralize and just break up big tech, the better off that we're going to be. And a lot of, I think, conservatives traditionally, when you say things like this, they're like, I'm not sure, I got to check my Republican book. Is this in the Republican playbook? It's like, it is. We've broken up companies before, and we've done that because it's not anti-free market to do this. It's pro-free market. In order to have a free market, you have to have competition. So yeah, that's breaking it up in public utilities.
Reinforce antitrust legislation.
Yeah,
absolutely. And as you point out, it's not just their ability to censor, deplatform, and implement those other strategies. It's this algorithmic capability to craft people's opinion, which they've explicitly acknowledged is a tool for winning elections. They believe they can, even without controlling the ballot box, they believe that they can control people's minds, and there's good evidence that that's the case. So I'm really glad to hear you talking about that. The other big sector, of course, that is able to be controlled by the digital folks as opposed to the analog folks that actually do stuff like mill trees and pack boxes for Amazon and drive trucks and all that kind of stuff, is what we saw Justin Trudeau deploy, which is the control of the financial system and the ability to deplatform people and remove them from their bank accounts. Do you have any thoughts about that, about what's going on in the financial sector right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely more ammunition to break up big tech, but then also, I mean, the centralized nature of our banks, I mean, that ties into the Fed, and then the entire modern monetary theory that like the government can just control money, print it when they want, and then because it's all centralized, if they don't like whoever, they don't like people sending money to Canadian truckers, they can go hunt those people down and freeze their bank accounts. I mean, I think our experiment right now of having centralized banks, I'm pretty sure we can say that it's failed. I mean, it has not done anything good for the country. So I do think this is the time, as we're getting driven off the financial cliff, to really say, hey, how can we restore some sovereignty to our financial system to make it more robust? I'd be interested in it, at least taking a serious look at going back to some form of a gold standard. because I just don't think you can trust people to be able to print their own money, and just human nature is what it is. People are going to hit that print button every single time. And then you tie that to digital. And again, you don't like the way someone spends their money. And now you know exactly who they are, and you can essentially ruin their lives. You can make it so that they can't even exist. And so those are just the forms of tyranny, I think, that we're facing, that we really have to safeguard.
So regarding the
against.
gold standard, there really isn't enough gold in the world right now to go back to that. But I've heard some very interesting ideas of pegging currency to assets within a nation state. So the federal government holds massive assets in terms of lands, mineral rights, other property. And one of the ideas being bounced around is to use that as the commodity that backs the currency. So you tie it back once again to something tangible. Whereas right now, as you know, with fiat currency, it's completely decoupled. I'd love to ask another question, and this is going to put you on the spot a little bit. I'd like to hear how you respond to it. Mr. Obama passed some legislation that really allowed the intelligence community, both directly and through the Five Eyes, to turn inwards on Americans. Do you have any thoughts about that? And is that a good thing, a bad thing, an indifferent thing? And what, if anything, should be done about it?
I mean, it's a horrible thing. I think right now, if you look at what was done, I mean, Russiagate is a perfect example. There's other examples out there, but I think Russiagate is the most glaring example, where you have the DNC working hand in hand with key members of the intelligence community and the media to create a completely and totally false narrative that's ruined people's lives, that's sown all kinds of distrust in our system. That right there is grounds, I think, for doing some serious reforms. There was the church committee, back 20, 30 years ago, that reformed the intelligence community. I served in the intelligence community for a brief stint. I was in the CIA as a paramilitary operations officer. Our intelligence community should be used to look outward. Like, we should be looking for threats against our country. We shouldn't be spying on Americans. It actually makes me very furious and sick to think that some of these people at the top rungs were doing the exact same things they told us that we were 100% forbidden from doing, because it violated our oath to the Constitution. So again, I just don't think that we can trust our government to have this ability of mass surveillance against the American people. So getting rid of the Patriot Act, I think, would be absolutely essential. And I do think we need to go through the intelligence community with a fine-tooth comb and really look at all the rot and all the different political operatives that are in there who have violated not just procedures, but also just violated their oath to the Constitution. And again, this goes, I feel like a lot of this too is getting done in the Russiagate era. Maybe all of it was being done behind closed doors with members of the intelligence community. I think the 2.0 version of this is not necessarily just the intelligence community and the political operatives cooperating. A lot of it's going to be done through big tech as well.
Yep. And so that's another one of the horizontal integrations that we've seen. And then, I become sensitive. I'm sure you're familiar with Five Eyes, in this odd situation where we have this reciprocal relationship where our IC is acting in other Five Eyes partners in the interest of their government against their persons, their citizens, and their IC is being used against our citizens. I've experienced that directly, particularly with the UK. That's been part of my story with the editing of Wikipedia, etc. That's coming from outside the US in a coordinated fashion. It appears to be running through MI5, 6. So I think we really need to relook at that. Have you had any chance to think about the biologic weapons agreements internationally? Has that been something that you've kind of processed, and do you have any thoughts about that? The treaty?
I mean, just looking at what happened with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, again, this is something that the congressional oversight, I think, owes the American people to really get to the bottom of, hey, was the NIH funding gain of function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology? We're owed those answers. But then also, the more that you learn about the topic, it appears that we're funding biological research throughout the entire world. When I first heard of it in Ukraine, I thought that was some sort of a crazy conspiracy theory. But it turns out, no, we actually were funding some form of biological research in these places. I understand generally like why we do it. I think maybe we got into some of this with noble intent, but it's just so rotten to go off the rails and then blow up into some sort of concoction like COVID potentially is. And we funded the whole thing, it's so I think this is something that we need to rein in. It needs to be much more closely regulated by experts that are directly accountable back to Congress. So there's some transparency there. But yeah, it's something that's just completely and totally off the rails, and I think needs a ton more oversight.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm grateful that you're also taking that position. We've looked carefully at the weapons convention, and we're convinced that there was a bit of a tell in the congressional testimony given about the Ukraine biolabs, quote unquote, which was that they were not engaged in offensive biologic weapons development. And that was carefully nuanced wording, because that goes back to the biowarfare conventions, which technically permit defensive bioweapon development. And I, as somebody who's kind of an expert in that area, I have problems myself parsing what is a defensive bioweapon and what is an offensive bioweapon. It's kind of in the eye of the beholder. Yeah. And I think that what I've read again and again is the logic that, well, the Chinese basically, if you cut through the crap, the logic is the Chinese are doing it, so we have to do it too. That's the justification for the transhumanism, the augmentation. It's about, you've been a soldier, so you appreciate that we now live in an environment in which the military believes that it's necessary to augment warfighter capabilities in a variety of different ways, mechanical and biological. And like everybody was shocked to hear Pfizer's Boria talking about a swallowable pill that can give monitoring to patients. He spoke about this at the WEF. This bio-monitoring pill that would indicate whether or not you've taken your medicine and would broadcast it, and that would be able to be surveilled. But I'm sure you know that we have that kind of capability currently for our warfighters to monitor their vitals when they're in a high pressure situation. I personally think that we need to really provide frankly, a lot more oversight into how we're treating our warfighter and the things we're subjecting our warfighter to in terms of these new technologies. Do we really have to go there and say, just because the Chinese are doing it, it's okay for us to be messing about and biologically modifying our warfighter personnel that have volunteered for this but don't really understand what's being done to them? I mean, that's and then the extension of that, of course, is the calamity of what we've done to the warfighter with these forced vaccines.
Oh yeah, you're not kidding. I mean, the way that we forced this on some of the most fit people on earth right now. I actually personally know a few guys that have died of suspicious heart attacks. And these are guys that are in special operations, and I spent like 20 years in that community, and there's all kinds of things that were killing us in that time. But guys falling over dead from heart attacks and cardiovascular disease, that's brand new, and there's a direct correlation that I think a blind man could see between the vaccines getting implemented in these young fit men, just like the soccer players falling over dead from heart attacks. But again, this is something that's completely forbidden from us even talking about. So a good deal more congressional oversight. And then also just the experimentation and the implementation, the hybrid of AI and this transhumanist bent. I think that certainly needs a lot more oversight. I think, as you know, you've worked in government contracting before. Once there's one idea and there's one project, there's always spinoffs from it, because then you can sell it and more money becomes available. That's to me what it seems like, how some of this stuff is just snowballed. Hey, the Chinese are looking at this, so we're going to look at this too. And the next thing you know, it spawns off into all these different subcontractors. And then you got guys like, Echo Health Alliance and Peter Dosick and these guys they got a bunch of government money that we, the people, gave them, and they're running around doing God knows what with the PLA and Wuhan. So this is exactly why we have congressional oversight.
What I'm hearing is somebody who really has a sophisticated understanding of this landscape of intelligence, military, the interaction of the government, and surprising depth in terms of world affairs. I really hope that you are able to prevail. It's, getting folks like you in there. And I heard you start off the talk explicitly acknowledging that this is not left or right. This is collectivism versus individualism and freedom. And it goes right back to the founding fathers and the core principles of our democracy. But I'm really glad to hear your level of awareness and sophistication in terms of the nuances of what's going on, the actual day-to-day of what goes on in the, I'll say it, with the military industrial and the pharmaceutical industrial complex. You've got a real eyes wide open point of view on that, and you're willing to speak about it in a concise and sophisticated fashion. So that's really refreshing. I think that we really need people like you in the House. And I hope that you manage to make it and have a long career, if that's what you want to do. God bless you. I'll tell you, I don't want to do it.
I think
yeah, if our country wasn't going off the rails, I wouldn't be doing it. I don't plan on making a career out of it. I just want to hopefully get us through this crisis, because I think we're kind of at an inflection point that if we don't get our act together in very short order, the country that we grew up in is not going to be the country we hand over to our kids. And so I think the stakes are just far too high. But I really appreciate what you said. That's a high honor coming from you. I appreciate it, Doctor.
Yeah. Well,
hell yeah.
So would you mind if we kind of wrap this up a little bit, Tommy? Just so I can get over to the hotel and get on with the next thing I have to do.
Absolutely. Let's do it. For everything both you guys touched on, though, if anybody listening is interested in some further reading, there is something kind of relevant to this. And it's James Bamford's book, came out in 2008. It's called Shadow Factory, the post 9/11 ultra secret NSA. Specifically, I know this is sounding crazy, specifically chapter 39. They go into something called IARPA, which is the intelligence version of DARPA, but they go into everything we're talking about: modifying the mind, super soldiers. I mean, kind of creating the future, making people, by the way, you can alter algorithms online, change what they literally believe and then what they think is real. I mean, it's through the looking glass. It is, you want to talk about this James Bond evil stuff. This book is 14 years old. So anybody listening, Shadow Factory, chapter 39 is specifically about everything you guys are talking about.
Well, and then we had Operation Mockingbird.
That's old hat. Come on now.
Yeah, but the point is that the history of the IC directly meddling with the information in the media and how we think is long, deep, and rich.
Oh yeah. We always look at foreign nations and we say Chinese state-run media, and it's like, dude, what do you think it is here? We just pawn it off better. We're better at hiding it. But Dr. Malone, I will put your Substack, your Getter, all that good stuff, not Twitter because you're still banned from there. Put that in the description. Mr. Kent, your Twitter, I'll put it on your website. If anybody wants to go donate to your campaign, go do it. Be a good American. And aside from that, I'll send you guys this episode when it's up. Dr. Malone, I will follow up with you about that blockchain, whatever cryptic foreshadowing you were doing earlier. And aside from that, thank you so much, Mr. Kent, Dr. Malone. God bless you both.
Thanks, guys. Thanks,
God
Doc.
bless America.
Be good and good luck, sir.